So next up, we're going to slowly remove this ribbon cable. There it is right there, close up. You just want to very slowly give it a little wiggle and pull it out. And again, you want to be super delicate with this because as you can see here, it loops up around and connects to this board in the front. And this is for the controllers, of course, the controller ports. If you damage this, you're not going to be able to use your controllers. So please take your time and just give it a slight wiggle back and forth until it is released. Just like that, you can see it came out pretty easily. I actually wrapped my finger underneath the bottom of it and put my thumb forward, pulled back and just wiggled it back and forth, and that's how I got mine out. So this entire front piece for the controller port, you can easily lift out as well. I'm gonna leave mine in place. I don't really have any need to remove it. I just need this cable detached so that I can get to the motherboard. So let's keep going to the next step here. Next, we're going to remove the screws to the left and right of the 62 pin connector. Of course, this is the pin connector for your cartridges. Your games slide into it, and we want this out of the way. That's going to help us take this motherboard out. So let's keep moving forward. These are Phillips screws on each side of our 62 pin connector, which is in the center. And again, these are different screws than the ones that were holding in the motherboard previously. So that's all you need to do there. Next, along the top, there is another Phillips in this corner that we want to remove. So let's remove that. That one does match the rest of the motherboard screws that we've unscrewed here. Next, we have two more screws, one in here, one hiding on the other side, right in here. It's hard to see, unfortunately. Right in there. All right, now we can gently lift up on the motherboard here. This whole piece should come out. And just like that, this is the back of the motherboard. And just like that, this is the back of the motherboard. You can see the expansion port up here from the bottom. At this point, you'd want to take a close look at all these solder points. We want to inspect the board as best as possible, see if anything seems out of place. There's some interesting information on here, of course, all the traces and everything. We can see that this is the APU01 version. It's printed again on the back of the board. You can flip your motherboard over to the other side and see what's what. So this is not a one chip. This, you can see that there are two. Let me move this around. You can see that there are two PPU chips on the motherboard right here, PPU1, PPU2. If this were a one chip motherboard, there would just be one big chip right there. So unfortunate that it's not, but I love this Super Nintendo all the same. What else is interesting on here? Here's the CPU right here in the corner. Right beside it is the VRAM. Here's the sound APU. Up in the top left corner, you can see that it's a Sony chip. You know, back in the days of the Sony PlayStation partnership that fell apart, I guess, unfortunately. Yeah, can you imagine having the timeline where we have the Super Nintendo PlayStation, the Super PlayStation, I don't know, the Nintendo PlayStation would have been really cool. Also, just below that sound chip, is a Nintendo sRGB chip, which is really interesting. For the RGB signals, I guess. I'm not going to remove this metal shroud, but underneath it, you can see a few other things, just capacitors and whatnot. Now, if you were really inclined to take this step further, you would, resolder new caps and all that on your motherboard, which I don't have the tools to do at this point, unfortunately, nor am I able to test everything out to be able to do that. But on the back, you can see this line here. That's the 62 pin connector. You can see number 62. They number it across from left on the top of the board to right. I think that's pretty cool. Pin 1 all the way across to 31, 32, all the way across to 62. It's cool to see these things up close. Yeah, all the PPU stuff is down in this board, down in this corner, down here. I'm going to very gently bring this motherboard back down to where it belongs. And at this point, if you were inclined to clean it, which I'm going to give a quick scrub to different components, especially the 62 pin connector here, this would be a great time to do that. So I'm also going to show you how to do that. So let's grab some rubbing alcohol and the toothbrush, and I'll give this all a quick scrub down and show you how to do it, including the switch connectors and whatnot. So let's do that. So what you want to grab is a toothbrush, of course, because we want to scrub everything down and get into all the parts. And you want some rubbing alcohol. You're going to want to use something over 90%. This is 95%. And that's really important. The higher, the better. Just use a little bit of it. It evaporates really quickly. So it just allows you to get in and break up all the gunk and stuff like that. All right, so now that you have your toothbrush and your rubbing alcohol, you're going to pour a little bit of it into a container here. You don't want to you don't need to drench your toothbrush. You just need a little bit of it. The goal of using the rubbing alcohol is essentially to break up any smut that might be sitting on your connectors, or especially if you spilt, again, I hope you didn't spill cola on your Super Nintendo growing up. I was the type of kid that was super anal about anybody using, eating food and using my controllers and stuff like that. So thankfully I actually have a very clean motherboard on my Super Nintendo. So I don't know how rare this is, but that's my situation. So right before we get into actually cleaning this, I want to make note and also say that since this is an APU variant, let's get it in focus there. Since this is an APU variant of the Super Nintendo, the 62 pin connector here is not removable without desoldering it on the back of the motherboard. So if you're going to do something like that, you could desolder your connector and clean everything down properly. I think some of the older versions, it lifts out or unscrews and you can lift it out and you can clean the actual connectors down on the motherboard itself. The newer versions, the APU was a release right before the one chip. So right before they replaced these PPU chips with the big one chip. And I think all the subsequent versions were kind of like this. So all this is fastened to it. So the best thing that you can do to clean your 62 pin connector is just, again, get the toothbrush out with a little bit of rubbing alcohol and go ham down on everything and make sure that everything's as clean as it can be. Of course, being careful not to nick any of your capacitors and resistors on the motherboard. You don't want to mess anything like that up when you're scrubbing around.